Hi, I'm Dr. Robin Koslowitz, YouTube's post-traumatic parenting expert. Today we're going to talk about Ruby Franke's guilty plea and why it's unwise to let your inner child parent your real life children. This is the instructive tale for that. But first, if you like this kind of content and you never want to miss another episode, click subscribe below so you never miss anything. You can also check out the post-traumatic parenting community on Instagram, the post-traumatic parenting podcast. Hi. So many of you responded to my last video about the Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt case with so many questions about child abuse, how this happened, how 8 passengers could possibly have gone on for so long without anybody calling the alarm bells, and how a mom could lack so much judgment and lose so much discernment that she could end up harming her children and bragging about it on YouTube. For those of us on a post-traumatic parenting journey, I think what the first thing we have to think about is something we say a lot, it's going to come up a lot in the book, is this idea that your inner child can't raise a child. And that sounds like kind of a cute Instagram meme, or it sounds like a kind of cute quotation that maybe could be on a throw pillow. But we mean this very seriously. Because what happens is, as post-traumatic parents, our inner child, that's the part of our psyche that did not complete a developmental stage or a developmental task. And now there's that wounded inner child that still is desperate, maybe that inner child that felt deprived when other children got so much stuff. Maybe an inner child that was bullied that is now afraid of the world. Maybe an inner child who really felt a lack of parental attention. And now, as you are providing that stuff to your own child, that inner child feels envious. That is normal. But when we don't pay attention to that, when we're unconscious of it, what happened to Ruby Franke could accidentally happen to us. So let's understand what I mean by an inner child raising a child. A lot of times, if you look at the historical 8 Passengers content, which was not a YouTube channel that I followed, it's a channel that I heard about, I've watched a lot of documentaries about, I've read about, so I've heard some of these things. Sometimes other people reposted archival footage of 8 Passengers, so I've seen these videos myself, but not as a fan, but rather as an interested psychologist observing a phenomenon. I looked at some of these videos and I can really see how an inner child can come out in a mom. And not only can the inner child be raising the children, but the inner child is acting out some of its revenge, some of its envy, some of its anger, some of its hostility towards actual real life children, because that inner child is so unacknowledged. Now, I am not diagnosing Ruby Franke. She is not a patient of mine. I am not saying that this is definitely what's happening. Inner child is just a metaphor. A metaphor is a useful explanation for something that's happening. But as Lisa Feldman Barrett says, all metaphors are helpful and all metaphors are wrong. Because a metaphor is not the perfect analogy. I cannot open up your brain right now and find your inner child sitting there. Like, you can't open up my brain and find my inner child sitting there playing with Play-Doh, right? And yet, when our inner child manifests itself, it is very clear. So let's use this as an example, as an educational example, so that in our own parenting, we never accidentally or unconsciously repeat this. There are videos on YouTube where one of the most famous ones, Ruby Franke's daughter's teacher calls and says that she forgot her lunch, and Ruby says, well, she has to learn. So don't give her food, let her be hungry. She's got to learn from her consequences. She later clarified that the school was 40 minutes away, that she felt the kid had a good breakfast, and all sorts of things. But that idea of she needs to be punished, she needs to learn, does that sound like a parent, or does that sound like a wounded sibling who's mad? I know in my family sometimes when one kid is upsetting another kid, sometimes the aggrieved party will be like, Mommy, you need to punish her, you need to hurt her, you need to do something. That's a child. That's how a child thinks, right? Small children especially have a strong ethic of justice. They feel like tit for tat. If you hit me, you need to get hit. And very often first graders, second graders have that kind of like strict justice mentality. There is no hanging jury like a second grade class. So if you ask a class, I actually did this today. I was reading a picture book with children and I asked them, how should the teacher have handled it? The younger the grades, the more outrageous the punishment. She should have been sent to the principal. She should have been punished. The teacher should take away her stuff and never give it back. Because small children do think in terms of justice. They don't always think in terms of what's the motivation of the person in front of me. So Ruby Franke is saying she needs to be hungry. Sounds like an older sibling talking about a younger sibling. You need to punish her. That ethic is very young. The idea that she needs to learn from her consequences of her actions, okay, sure, that is an adult. That sounds like an adult, right? If my child says to me, I'm not studying for my test, I don't care, I don't mind, I'm going to get a bad grade. And then the next morning, my child says to me, could you call my teacher and tell them that I wasn't feeling well last night and that's why I didn't study so I can be excused from the test? I'm sorry, no, not going to lie for you. I don't value lying. It's not something I believe in doing. You're going to have to go to school and take the test. You might get a good mark. You might get a bad mark. You might feel very uncomfortable. You're going to learn from the consequences. Do I want you to feel uncomfortable? No, I'm your mom, right? I am not trying to make you feel uncomfortable. Discomfort is the natural outcome of your decision to play video games instead of studying. Am I going to collude with you and lie to the teacher? No, I'm not going to act not in accordance with my values and consistently with my values. So, and yes, you might feel uncomfortable from that situation. You might get a not so great mark. And then you're going to learn your lesson, not because I am sitting there as a vengeful older child saying, you need to learn. No, but because naturally you will learn when that happens. The way Ruby Franke was talking, I actually did watch that video, and the way she was saying, well, she'll be hungry and then she'll learn. That vengefulness did sound to me like an inner child coming out. There was another video where she's threatening to cut off the head of a child's doll. What does that sound like? Who threatens to cut off the head of a doll? Doesn't that sound like an older brother tormenting a little sister? Maybe this is me because I had older brothers, but what does that sound like? Does that sound parental? Does that sound like a natural and logical consequence for any behavior at all? I can see saying, you guys left your dolls strewn across the bottom of the stairs, so I'm going to pick up all the dolls, I'm putting them in a box, and I'm not giving them back right away until you show me that you can clean up after yourselves. That would be a more adult consequence. Just because you want to play with dolls doesn't mean I have to break my neck when I trip on them on the top step, right? That's parental. We can have a conversation about how do we remember to clean up the dolls? What are we going to do about the fact that the dolls end up strewn all over the place and people trip on them? That's an adult to child conversation. We have a problem here. We need to solve it. I'm going to cut off the head of your doll. That does not sound parental. That sounds like an inner child, perhaps an inner child wound of having an older sibling cut off your doll's heads when you were a child. Remember that when you're a small child and you have a doll, that doll feels the way I feel about my baby. When I am 4 years old and I'm cradling my doll, or even 8 or even 10, and I'm in that fantasy world where this is my baby and I'm the mommy and I'm playing out some sort of a fantasy, if you cut off the head of my doll, I'm going to feel emotionally the way a mom would feel if you had cut off the head of her baby right in front of her. Emotionally, it feels the same. If I'm a little kid and I was building a Lego tower all morning and I was working really, really hard on it and it's getting taller and better and it's just the way I wanted it. And then dad comes and he's angry because I'm playing with Lego instead of, getting ready for school, and he kicks that tower down. How would dad feel if he is working as an architect and he makes plans for a building and then I come and I rip them up into shreds. Kind of feels the same way. Doesn't teach a lesson. Saying to a child, because I had to drive you to school instead of you taking the bus and I lost 30 minutes of my night, so now you owe me some time, so this evening you're going to do an extra chore, that can be more parental if you're doing consequences, right? And if you're trying to teach the child an actual lesson that one adult teaches a child. Torture teaches nobody lessons. Cutting off the head of somebody's doll does not teach them a lesson. Telling a child that you don't like their behavior so they're not getting any holiday gifts this year, does that really teach a lesson? Perhaps saying, that one thing you were hoping for, you're going to have to chip in for it, or you're not getting it this year. You're not getting any gifts at all. That sounds harsh and punitive. And who's harsh and punitive? Very small children. And it's so interesting because when I read this story in a classroom of children and I asked them what the consequence should be, like a child acted wrongly in school, the younger the class, the more harsh the punishments. The older the kids got, like the 3rd grade versus the 5th grade versus the 7th grade. So the 7th grade, a child was playing with a toy in class and disrupting the rest of the class. 7th grade said the teacher should take away the toy. Fair enough, right? You can't play with the toy, so I'm going to take it away. The 3rd grade said things like, the teacher should take away the toy and throw it in the garbage. The kindergartner said, the teacher should take away the toy and give it to the principal, and the kid has to come and get it from the principal, and the principal says, you can't get it back till the end of the year. We're in December now, right? That's a very harsh punishment. And doesn't add anything. If I take away the toy for a couple of hours, a 1st grader is going to learn the same lesson as if I take away the toy for the rest of the year. So I might as well take it away for a couple of hours, especially if you're disrupting the lesson with the toy. So we're going to not have the toy till the end of the lesson so that the lesson won't be disrupted. The older the child, the more mature, the more adult-like, the more the punishment fit the crime. One of the ways we know that the inner child is trying to parent our real-life children is when things are disproportionate. When our response to what our child does is way too big for what the child did. So little boy was supposed to be getting dressed for school. Dad comes into the playroom and finds him still in PJs building a Lego house. Right? Disproportionate response, kicking down the Lego house, right? You're never allowed in the playroom again. For a month, you're not allowed to touch your Lego. Those are very disproportionate responses. And I want to ask Dad, what was going on for you at that moment? How angry did you feel right then? And very often the dad will say something like, when I was a little kid, I had no toys at all. And now here I spend all this money buying him toys. And this is what he does with them. He uses them to annoy me and inconvenience me. I'm hearing a small child who really wanted toys. I'm not hearing an adult who is saying, my son needs to learn to manage his time better. How can I teach him that? And manage his time better might be, now we're going to have to get dressed very quickly outside of the playroom because I see getting dressed in the playroom is too distracting for you. That's all. Like I said, maybe since I have to drive you to school instead, and therefore it's going to take me a half hour, I'm going to need you to make up some of that time to me this evening. So you're going to do a job for me to make up that time. Now, not 30 minutes because he's very, very, very little. Making him do one extra job is already enough. It could be a 5-minute job. You need to pay back some of the time that I spent. That's how an adult teaches a child a lesson, right? Tomorrow, I'm not going to allow you to get dressed in the playroom at all. Tomorrow, you're going to get dressed in your bedroom because I see getting dressed in the playroom is too distracting for you. That's a consequence. That's enough. That's how an adult talks to a child. An older sibling comes and stomps down the Lego tower with glee as he ruins it. That's not how adults act. That's not a fair fight, right? That's an older sibling. That's not an adult. So much of Ruby Franke and her pleading guilty to me feels like an unconscious inner child an inner child that Ruby Franke perhaps wasn't conscious of at all, trying to parent real children. And then humans don't like feeling cognitive dissonance. when we do something and it's not really consistent with our values, we have to do something to rationalize that away and make ourselves feel like better people. So that's where you hear a lot of the Ruby Franke saying things like, this is why I did this, and this is a very appropriate punishment, and she deserves this because of this and that. My kids are not getting holiday gifts, and how dare they're so well resourced, they have so much stuff, their life is so good, and they're spoiled, and they're bratty, and they're doing this. And again, I'm hearing a sibling, right? Spoiled, bratty. This is how an older sibling talks. This is how a child talks. This is not how an adult should talk. Certainly not how an adult talks from their highest self and their truest values. So I'm hearing an inner child coming out, and then I'm hearing an adult saying, and yeah, children should learn the consequences of their actions, and that's why I'm posting this on YouTube, so all other moms should learn this too. Because otherwise she might have to think about what she's doing and think, perhaps I was a little harsh. Perhaps that was my inner child parenting my real children and not my best self. Perhaps I need to make amends or change my ways. Perhaps I need to do something else with my anger other than let it out on my kids. But a lot of adults don't understand that because a lot of us were parented by an inner child instead of an adult. And so then that seems normal because what we're used to seems normal. But just because it's normal in the statistical sense, meaning it happens more often or frequently, does not mean it's normative in the sense that this is a good, healthy thing to do and we should keep on doing it. Normal and normative are two very different things. So yeah, it happens. There are a lot of inner children parenting children, but it's not good. So therefore, had Ruby Franke perhaps not be posting this on YouTube and had time as she's driving back in the car instead of vlogging on her phone, which anyway, questionable choice, just simply because don't drive and update YouTube at the same time. Probably not a wise thing to do. But aside from that, had she been driving home in silence, thinking about, this conversation that she just had with her kids where she threatened to cut off the doll's head or not give them any holiday gifts, maybe that little voice in her stomach would say, well, Ruby, was that about you or was that about the children? Was that anger coming from a place of a justifiable, I need to set a boundary with this child so that this child learns how to be an adult in the world and how to be a better human? Or was this coming from me and my anger and my frustration and my inner child stuff that shouldn't have been enacted out on my children? The other piece that inner children, when you can really tell that your inner child is parenting your children, is when something is personalized. So when we say, why is my child doing this? Missing the bus all the time, not wanting to do their math homework, refusing to go to soccer practice, not wanting to brush their teeth, hitting their little sister. That's a normal, healthy adult question. Parents ask questions like this all the time. I'm a child psychologist. I get asked these questions all the time. Why is my child refusing to use the potty? Why doesn't my child want to go to a sleepover? Why does my child not want to get on the school bus? Why does my child only want to go to sleepovers and never be home, right? All of those types of questions, those are normal. Why is my child doing this to me? Particularly when it has nothing to do with you at all, is your inner child. So if dad comes down and he finds little Logan sitting and, building a house out of Lego instead of getting dressed, and he's thinking, now I'm going to be late for work. Why is Logan doing this to me? He's making me late for work. Logan's not doing this to you. Logan's 5. Logan sees Lego, and in his brain, because he doesn't have the time management skills of an adult, it's like, Lego, I'm going to build Lego. Yeah, the bus, it'll be here. But, that's in plenty of time, like 5 whole minutes. I have plenty of time. And in that fantasy world that little children get into, he starts building his Lego and he's enjoying himself. He completely forgets that adults have schedules and we have to make it and we have to get to the bus and then dad has to get to work. He's not thinking about any of that. He's thinking about Lego. Logan's not doing this to dad. Logan's simply doing this. When you're asking yourself, why is my kid doing this to me, about things that really have nothing to do with you at all, your kid's not messing up their room to annoy you. Your kid's not refusing to do their math homework to you. Your kid's not refusing to go to soccer practice to annoy you, right? Your kid is doing those things for reasons of their own. The to me part is an inner child, again, getting involved with parenting your children. So to me, this entire Ruby Franke, Jodi Hildebrandt case is a case of somebody who had a very unexamined inner child that seemed to be coming out a lot and parenting her real life children because of all these unexamined emotions that she felt, perhaps about her own childhood, perhaps about her family of origin, perhaps about her schooling experience, whatever it was. And then an adult talking in these very inner childlike words about her own children, right? That like, he needs to learn, I need to punish him, it needs to hurt, right? I'm going to cut off the head of your doll. All of those childlike things, because adult self didn't say to the inner child, I'm here, I can parent us as we parent our children. I don't need to, yeah, I didn't get this when I was a little kid and my kids have it now. And I feel envy, but that envy tells me that this is something I value. And as I give it to my real life children, I can experience that sensation. In giving, we are given to. In parenting, we are parented. So as I give my child this beautiful doll that they want, the kind of dolls that I never got when I was a kid that I wanted so badly, as I give that to my children, I am going to experience the sensation of getting stuff from the perspective of the giver. And I want my inner child to really tune in and pay attention to that sensation. And that will be healing. And the inner child no longer can take over and try to parent the actual children. So what I'm reading here is a lot of an inner child trying to parent children. And then we have the whole Jodi Hildebrandt side of the equation, where we have an adult who needs to rationalize what she's doing. Ruby needs to make it make sense to herself that she's doing all these harsh things with her kids. And she meets Jodi. And Jodi is a therapist with actual license, a diploma. And she says, yeah, you need to do that. Yeah, you need to punish them. In fact, you're not even punishing them enough. And then she breaks out like the duct tape and the cayenne pepper. And just top tip, if you're ever vetting a parenting educator who's helping you parent your children, if she says anything involving duct tape or cayenne pepper that isn't like, I don't know, duct tape the handle of the door that just cracked, or, cayenne pepper tastes good on pizza. If she's saying anything about duct tape or cayenne pepper, run for the hills. Run, do not stop, go, do not pass go, do not collect $200, run. Because any parenting expert who advocates duct taping children should lose her license, as Jodi Hildebrandt did, should go to jail, as Jodi Hildebrandt did, right? Because sadly, Ruby Franke was looking for someone to make this kind of inner child parenting real life children be okay. And she found the perfect person, Jodi Hildebrandt. Jodi Hildebrandt was a cult leader in search of a cult. And she found Ruby Franke with a cult following. And she's like, great, I can do this. We can work together. In the interim, those children were very, very badly harmed. It makes me very encouraged that YouTube followers were the ones who reported this. That the police and DCFS or whatever that is in their state, the Division of Child and Family Services, were called multiple times by watchers of the channel, because that makes me encouraged that there are some people who perhaps also have an inner child trying to parent their children. So they find a channel like 8 Passengers, they start to watch it and they start thinking, yeah, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to harm my children. No cayenne pepper and duct tape in my parenting, please. Other than, like I said, I have definitely used my fair share of duct tape to fix, the cover of binders, and to fix door handles, and to fix broken glasses in a pinch. But other than that, there's no place for duct tape in my parenting. Okay, the place for duct tape here is on the mouth of a parenting influencer who says to duct tape children. Yeah, cayenne pepper belongs on pizza if you go for spicy. That's it. So you have someone who got onto 8 Passengers perhaps thinking, oh, I can rationalize harsh parenting. And then they're watching it and the little uh-oh voice in their stomach starts going, yeah, sounds like abuse, not parenting. This just doesn't sound good. I don't like this. And then they actually called child abuse services. That gives me so much hope and just so much healing that can come from that. Your discernment saying, no, this is actually not okay. And I am not comfortable with this. I am glad that Ruby Franke pled guilty in the extent that what does guilty mean? Guilty means I did something wrong. I violated either my own or an objective moral standard, and I am sorry for that. Now, whether she actually feels remorse, if she's doing that in court, I can't speculate. Psychologist, not psychic. Can't speculate as to that. She's not my patient. I don't know her actual motivations or anything like that. But guilty puts a stamp of this was wrong on the entire 8 passengers situation, the sharenting, the abuse, the harshness, so that we can look at that and anybody who ever thinks, perhaps there's a new momfluencer who's a little gentler than Ruby, but still pretty harsh. And you're like, well, 8 passengers was problematic, but this person's fine. She pled guilty. Guilty means this was wrong. So now you can look at that little voice in your stomach that was like, wow, it's kind of familiar to how I was raised, and yet it's feeling wrong. What do I do with that? Guilty. She pled guilty. This was a crime. This violated not only my moral standards in watching this, but my moral standards don't have to be hers. This violated state moral standards, governmental moral standards, which is sort of the agreed upon, what is a moral standard? An agreed upon set of behaviors that a culture subscribes to. We don't believe in abusing children. That's why we have laws that say don't abuse children. This was called abusing children. She pled guilty to abusing children, to endangering the welfare of a child. Let's remember that the next time you're watching a momfluencer on YouTube and she's harsh, but not quite as harsh. Wait a minute. Let's remember that little voice that was aroused by Ruby Franke's stuff. Let's remember that that little voice was correct. Our discernment was correct. This was harmful. This was abuse. So yeah, to me, the Ruby Franke story is an instructive anecdote to what happens when our inner child tries to parent our children. Now, what happens if you're a parent who does want to be a cycle breaker, who doesn't want to repeat Ruby Franke's mistakes, but your inner child talks a lot about your regular children? What do? So I think what's important to do is to talk to your inner child and hear it out and not judge yourself. How can I be jealous of my own kids? I know for me, my children have because I was raised in a home with a very chronically ill parent, my children have the ability to like make noise and explore in an uninhibited way and, and be joyful and childish in a way that I wasn't. Before I did all of this work, sometimes I would come from a very judgmental, shaming place. Again, that real inner child, that jealous inner child. And I would look at, it's really more envious. I would look at my husband and kids playing and I would say, it's bedtime. Why are we riling them up? They should be doing their homework. Why are we wasting time with this? I would get very harsh because I was so envious. I so wanted that. And then when I started thinking about this and exploring it in therapy and in my journaling, I said, oh my gosh, I'm so messed up. How can a mom be envious of her own children? Like, what kind of a mom am I? But then I realized that my envy is simply pointing me towards something I value. I value children being themselves, expressing themselves, and having fun. I value having fun with my children, which means I need to learn how to have fun with my children. I need to learn how to play. And I actually, from learning how to be a play therapist, I taught myself how to play with my children. It felt very uncomfortable at first. It was a difficult skill for me to learn how to play. You look around at me and like there's all these toys in this office and all these books that I share, and I'm always sharing my new toy hack or my new game. The reason I'm so good at toys and games is because I was bad at it, because I never did it in my childhood. I had to learn it from scratch in a way that someone whose parents played with them didn't have to, because it was natural to them. It was very unnatural to me. My envy turned me directly to my value. I was envious that my children had the ability to play and be joyful, that my husband could play and be joyful with them. I wanted that too, so I learned how to get that because I value it. So if you're jealous of your children, if you're envious of your children, if you're angry at your children, if you feel an intense sadness as you see your children have something you didn't have, those emotions say nothing about you as a parent, that you don't love them because you're feeling those emotions. And they say everything about you as an inner child and as what you value. So if you're sad because as you watch your children enjoy something that you didn't have, that sadness tells me we only are sad about the loss of something we value. You value that experience. So now what you need to do is tap into your children having it and turn your inner child's attention towards the experience of giving it to your children, and your inner child will start to heal. If you have questions about this video, if you want to know more about stopping your inner child from raising your children, if you want to know more about the Ruby Franke, Jodi Hildebrandt case, I know some of you DM'd me and some of you commented on the last video asking more about Jodi and my opinion of her as a professional therapist and what went wrong there. So if you have more questions about this case, or if you want to know more about stopping your inner child from raising your actual children, please feel free to comment below. Please DM me. Check us out on Instagram, where we have a lot of lively back and forth conversations, and we can talk more about the inner child. And stay tuned for some really exciting giveaways and other really fun programs that we're going to be running. And of course, the post-traumatic parenting book will be out soon, and I cannot wait to hear what you think of it. Bye-bye for now. See you next time.